Alright everybody, welcome back to We Play Games. I'm Walker, and here we are in Age of Wonders 4 about to decode the tier lists. So this is going to be just sort of like I would say a stopper sort of video, a video which is going to allow you to understand and comprehend the tier list videos from like 7 months ago, and contextualize them for like the modern day. But we're going to do it sort of like vivisection style. A lot of this is not going to be like me just trying to say like, okay, this is how things have moved around in the meta, but rather like where philosophically the meta comes from, the sort of behaviors that a meta player is actually going to like utilize in a real game of Age of Wonders 4. You do not need to play Insanely Sweaty. Like, if you want to just play Age of Wonders 4 and vibe, then I think that 100% of what you need to do is just watch Vivisection, watch the tier list videos from 7 months ago. They are still mostly accurate. We're going to contextualize them here, but they really will not hurt you. But if you want to do like zombie brain stuff, you're 100% in the right place, because I think we need to start this video off actually by having a conversation about builds in Age of Wonders 4. So when you're building something in Age of Wonders 4 and you want it to function either in Vivisection or in autoresolve, or just like to not make your life miserable because you have to click all of these manuals all the time, I kind of need to like deconstruct the entire game for you and help you understand how to build something. That is what Vivisection is for. But if for whatever reason you are unwilling to watch my masterpiece, then very, very basically, you need to stop building Galaxy Brain builds like in really bold letters, because Galaxy Brain builds in Age of Wonders 4 are horrendously bad. They're garbage. Galaxy Brain builds are like largely reliant upon the player having action economy and like control over combat, but once you start playing multiplayer and autoresolve only, you realize that A, you do not have that, B, the tools that like rely upon you to do all these like crazy wild things largely are not going to function well in autoresolve, simply because the autoresolve is not perfect. And then like as a consequence, C, of all of these things, Galaxy Brain builds are way worse than BRAINDEAD builds. BRAINDEAD builds in Age of Wonders 4, because of the scaling based off of the creeping phase, are just like really the core of the game when it comes to meta. If you're just sitting here doing like, I'm gonna do all the dopamine in the world and make the numbers go up on my total build, you can do that. If you want to have fun in the game and that is how you have fun in the game, then you can. But like, those builds are horrendous in actual multiplayer. In actual multiplayer, the dumber your build, the better. You want your build to be as dumb as the autoresolve is until like at least tier 3 or tier 4 tomes. That's where you want to start getting creative, I guess. But like, to be entirely honest, if you watch Vivisection and you read these things, or if you like do not want to read tooltips, then just like watch my tier list videos. They really are still accurate. But like at the end of the day, you really need to adjust your expectations. I'm not trying to tone you down. I'm trying to tell you that like this is the most insanely corn-pilled game in the universe. Like, it has a research technology tree, so it's not as like truly Chainsaw Massacre as Heroes of Might and Magic 3, but it is like one step below that. So you need to, if you're playing Age of Wonders 4, you need to make yourself unbelievably stupid. That will make you stronger. You are Son Goku in Dragon Ball Z Abridged. Please stop pretending like you're going to impress me by sending something that's smart. Send me something that's stupid. You send me something that's stupid that the autoresolve will massacre stuff, I will pin it in this. Like, I really will, because that is what Age of Wonders 4 really truly is about. But I know that people like Galaxy Brain stuff, so let's talk about Galaxy Brain stuff next, I guess. But really, really, really be as dumb as possible when you're playing Age of Wonders 4. You will play better. So I think the first trap that a lot of people fall into in Age of Wonders 4 is the same trap that like a lot of people on the subreddit for Slay the Spire fell into like 5 years ago. Not to rehash it in case you have watched Vivisection first somehow. But basically, I think a lot of 4Xs, where they get their widget spinning from is from trying to interact with the like biomechanical puppets playing the game. They're trying to create dopamine for people, and people mostly get their dopamine from looking at numbers, but they look at numbers without context, and then they just kind of like try to derive things from those numbers, assuming that they mean something. But I promise you, there's way too much stuff going on in a 4X to think that the numbers mean anything. Most numbers in 4Xs, most of the time, are just literally there to confuse people. This video is going to focus on the stuff that is not there to confuse people, the stuff that is there to help you. And so this is something that I think will just generically be useful for both sweaty players as well as like new people. So whenever you're looking at any tome, you need to understand understand not just like, okay, there is a tome, here are the spells, but you need to understand how to interact with the tome. In order to interact with the tome, there are a couple of crucial steps. First, you want to be identifying where the power budget of the tome is. That is where I think the medium who are like verging on high skill players will get the most value out of rewatching my tier list videos, because my tier list videos do direct you towards power budgeting. But the way that you want to interact with a tome is as such. Identify what pieces you want to research and which pieces you want to save. The reason you want to be saving some pieces from like your earlier tomes is because of the way research works in Age of Wonders 4 right now. So if you know the research scaling, then you know that as you research every single tome, the cost of everything that you research is going to go up. But because the costs of the things are set whenever that spell or skill or whatever is unlocked for you, you can kind of like float and carry inexpensive, air quotes, technologies with you into the future. So a really, really powerful meta strategy that a lot of people employ in high-level multiplayer, but will also work great for you at home, is if you're working on like your tier 3 tomes or whatever, just like research scouts instead of like stupid expensive spells that you're never going to cast, because you're going to get to your tier 4s like way faster. If you research something from your low tier tomes when you're working on your high tier tomes that cost 250 knowledge when you're at like 600 knowledge per turn, you'll research like 4 skills in one turn and feel like you have obliterated the universe. So if you're not doing that and you're not researching scout skills up here, you are not a high skill player yet. But now that you have this information, hopefully you can adjust your behaviors to make sure that they are a little more meta. But if you're just a single player person playing at home, this is also going to be a lot of fun for you, because it means like you can just like skip around and exclusively take the powerful things, which is mostly what the tier list videos are going to be aiming you towards. That's, you know, not to say that you can't be looking to try to get max value out of everything in a tome, but really like 90% of the time you should be looking not to research everything and specifically saving things in order to research them later on for that like tome teching jump. Alright, so what's going on here, Walker? You're telling people to do stupid stuff and you're telling people to do, like, galaxy brain stuff. Well, really what you want to do is you want to make it so your army is as dumb as possible and that you are as smart as possible, and that, like, that's kind of where you need to make the separation. Walker, whenever he streams, kind of doesn't make the intuitive leap to also not be an idiot himself on the strategic layer, which is where you can, like, watch my videos once you know how to play the game, really, after watching Vivisection, and go, wow, I can play this game 10,000 times better than Walker once I know how to play it, can't I? Because that dude is just like vibing and not paying attention to movement points and just like throwing things all over the board. And like, you know, have fun. Like, just really, it really is your oyster. But like, once you understand autoresolves and you understand how to move things on the strategic layer, I promise that you can play better than I can. And just watch my videos and then just like watch my play patterns and watch what an idiot I am and then learn from it and grow. And I really do think that you'll be the best player of Age of Wonders 4 in the universe if you do so. But that like, you know, Gurren Lagann experience aside, I want to focus now on trying to decode some of the things that are new, because I do know that like some people are gonna have some questions about that, like what are my thoughts and feelings on mystics and blah 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 blah. So I'm gonna focus on the things that I know where they're gonna slide in, because I do have experience with them. I know that people want to know my thoughts and feelings on the new things, but like I hope that people understand by the incredible amount of passion and dedication that I put into my videos, at least into the voicing part and literally nothing else, that like I really don't want to mislead you. I don't want to tell you what rank these things are if I don't know, because I haven't played with them, because I know to do my homework. I take my job very seriously. The tier list videos are not low effort. They're low effort in recording, but they're like really monomaniacal, self-contained, like things that will destroy you in terms of the effort that I put in order to do the research for them. So I am not going to tell you that Tome of Prosperity is S tier or whatever. It probably is, but I can tell you that people really have absolutely no idea what they're talking about whenever it comes to Mystics, and I can tell you that as a person who has played like an absolute ridiculous amount of Mystics in my life. So let's dissect Mystics and the new different subcultures for it, and how to like visualize them within Vivisection terms. So when people hear me say, be as dumb as possible when playing Age of Wonders 4 or as corn-pilled as possible, they kind of hear that and they think it is a license to go attack other players, but like that is also like low-skill player behavior once you understand the meta and how you're supposed to behave in the game. Because like really what you're supposed to be doing with your units is clearing stuff. Like you just get so much more out of clearing an Ancient Wonder than you do from fighting another player. Because when you fight another player, you know what you get from them? You get a city. And you know how unimportant cities are in Age of Wonders 4? They're pretty unimportant. Like, cities are really mostly for making units to kill things, and then making knowledge to help your units kill things, and then ignoring all the other nonsense. And if that confuses you, then I cannot help you. But like, that is the nature of how you're supposed to play the game. And so when you start doing stuff like, I'm gonna try to rush somebody with a whole bunch of units, you realize very quickly when you're playing against someone who is actually high skill that like, it's just not gonna work, because you're gonna invest all of your mana in trying to like set up a whole bunch of Phantasm Warriors and then just kill them on like turn 12. But if your opponent knows how to farm and your opponent knows how to like sacrifice things off, they're gonna have a hero that's like 5 levels higher than you, and it doesn't matter if you have like a bunch of extra random units on the board, because a bunch of extra random units on the board really do just like boil down to HP when they're really low. This is something that you'll learn sort of as like a natural progression if you ever play Skirmish. Like, Cody complains about it all the time because like low tier units do almost absolutely nothing. They're mostly just HP and then like minus morale after a certain point. They're a little less minus morale now, so you can bring them to fights, but like it used to be hilariously bad to bring 18 to every single fight if it meant bringing another tier 1, because people would just kill it and then your army would run away. Now you can bring units that are not good, but like you really have to be careful if you're playing against somebody who understands combat in Age of Wonders 4 by bringing just like a low tier Arcanist with no ranks on them. Your army will be weaker as a result. So that is like, I guess, the first warning whenever we dump in on Mystics, because Mystics, I think nobody gets. I hear a lot of people talking about summoning and like rushing and stuff, but like you just don't kill people for cities. It's not a question of like, is this thing rude or not? It's just weak. If you do that and you conquer a city that does nothing except make units for you, and it costs you 6 turns to get it, and like another player is actually playing better and killing infestations, your economy is going to be bad, because this is not Civilization 6. There's no scaling in cities. They just build like little widgets that do not matter. The only thing that matters is units and kind of knowledge too, and hero levels. I would say actually that is in opposite order of prevalence, though I suppose it depends on what's going on in earlies. But like here, let's talk a little bit about how to use summoners like really in a meta sense, because people are just using them for rushing, and like if you understand the game and you understand how to play it, then rushing is bad, and so like that does hurt summoners, but summoners really are still playable as long as you know what's going on. So one of the problems with summoners is something that kind of just like emerges out of the game once you start realizing like the actual pacing of it and how you can conquer like the map really, really fast with autoresolves. Once you start doing that though, you'll also see that like evolutionary things just really are not as good in like true autoresolves as you're used to, because you're used to being able to necessarily farm them up and rely upon them, growing and keeping your power high. And once you understand autoresolves, they will do that for you. But one of the big problems with summoning, if you're trying to do like silly rush stuff, if you play against somebody who is able to defeat your first army and you're leveraging evolutionary units, you are dead. You're gone from the game. You cannot play. And so if you want to play summoning and you want to like be able to keep pace without necessarily falling behind because you're not doing evolutionary things and then trying to keep them alive with manuals, just play with warding and mists. Warding gives you access to Phantasm Warriors. I think people in the like BRAINDEAD kind of space do attempt to leverage these for rushes occasionally, but more often than not, the best way to use a Phantasm Warrior is as one of the best in class for like starting fights. Most of the game really is about starting fights with like a single unit, because that is going to be the unit that's the sack stack, which is going to take all the damage for you in the fight most of the time in an auto resolves, and therefore allow your heroes to keep clearing and keep gaining experience points and like jam it. But if you don't know what that means, I'm not trying to shill it. I'm trying to like tell you that like if you do not get this this game on a fundamental level, I don't think you're going to get any of my videos. If you get the game on a fundamental level, then you'll get my videos, but that really is the barrier. But like Phantasm Warriors are up there with like Gargoyles in terms of like just best in class for like starting fights and generally not dying, and unlike Gargoyles are not on a hilarious bad tome, but rather on a really sweet tome. But this means that you can use the Phantasm Warrior to scale itself up, because it probably isn't going to die, because these things are really durable, but it'll scale itself up, it'll use its floating movement speed in order to like jam around and start fights for your hero, and allow you to scale your real economy. That's how you should use them. If you're dumping all your astral echoes on this, it's just not, your economy's not going to work very well. That's sort of like the biggest ding against summoners, and why they're like definitely not S tier, is that their astral echoes make no sense. Sort of like how Attunement's astral echoes make no sense. Summoners' astral echoes really only make sense if you assume that they're balanced around manuals versus the map. That really, it's oozing with that, because once you start seeing like how you're supposed to play the game and like the impact of clearing the board, then you realize that like you just lose stuff, and people being worried about like, oh, I'm gonna dump all the astral echoes onto this evolutionary thing and have this great unit on like turn 12, that you can do that, but it doesn't really matter, because that is only useful if you're using those things for pacing and clearing, and because 3 astral echoes to 1 exp is just absurdity. You should not be spending a lot of them on Phantasm Warriors. Use them for timing attacks. So this is another one of those like broader meta conversations about how you want to be aggressive in Age of Wonders 4. I'm not trying to tell you to not be aggressive when I'm saying don't rush. I'm saying when you have an attack in Age of Wonders 4 is just the same way as it is in every other 4X. When you attack in Age of Wonders 4, you want to make sure that the difference level between you and another player is as close to astronomical as possible. That's another reason why rushing is bad, because they'll just like bring in a bunch of units that you can stun with like the Umbral Staff or Frozen Effects or whatever, and then their units have like just eaten upkeep for them all game and prevented them from doing a timing attack that's good. But like, just don't rush. It's not great for you. Instead, time attack. Timing attacks are based around utilizing extremely high quality units. So what I recommend for like a summoner would be to start with warding, pick something else, like probably alchemy, because the biggest problem with these things is not the lightning weakness, it's the tier 1 problem. They will stun lock you. Rather, it is to leverage mislings. So if you're trying to set up for leveraging mislings, just save your mana, make enough Phantasm Warriors that you can maintain pace on EXP capture and just clearing things. But what you want to do is save as much mana as possible, make sure that you get up your wizard tower for summoning mislings, like as soon as you can as a summoner, and then allow you to leverage mislings by just dumping them onto the board as soon as you unlock that research. And as soon as you do that and start taking fights in autoresolves, you'll realize that like, yeah, you can summon like 15 Phantasm Warriors and attack somebody who may or may not die to you depending upon how familiar they are with the game's mechanics. But like, if you're playing against somebody who understands the game, this is 10,000 times better, because this is absolutely horrifying. If somebody shows up with like 15 mislings on turn 30, you're way more dead than if somebody shows up with 15 Phantasm Warriors on turn 20. So just do that, and then like put in your astral echoes where they're important. I think that largely for summoning it is just like a pure pacing based thing, because I really do think that if you cannot line up a good time attack because like you just notice somebody's weak, don't like overinvest on mislings. I would say that for summoners, really, they probably want to jump over to Chaos after mislings, so that way they can go down to the best timing attack in the universe, which is, of course, Balors off of Fight for Power, off of the Chaos Eaters. Because if you've never done that, then you will see very clearly that the best way to win PvP fights is by astronomical margins, and the best way to accomplish astronomical margins in a PvP fight typically is I have like 3 Balors and you're just wandering around with tier 1 units. And you can do that if you know how to like tome skip and actually like understand the research system in Age of Wonders 4 and the way that your research is really going to scale once you start taking a bunch of fights. So it's not to like dissuade people from playing summoners. They're still probably my favorite because they do have a tier 3 support unit, and I'm just like a support unit fanboy because I'm a defense mode fanboy. But summoners are B tier, maybe B plus, but they are not any higher than that, and that is a consequence of the way that the game is truly played. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Attunement, other than to highlight that I did know that they were going to be the strongest a while ago, and B, they definitely still are, and that is going to be a huge problem for game balance as people like learn how to play the game for the first time and vibe, because like the world map casting and combat casting echoes economy on Attunement makes absolutely no sense. The one on summoning you can kind of make sense of, because like yeah, people do manual combats a lot at Triumph probably, and like balance things that way, even though balance at manual combat should 100% be aimed at fun and not balance. But like the numbers on Attunement are borderline disrespectful in the same way that Tome Corruption was borderline disrespectful as a like a vibing thing. If you want to play with Tome Corruption and just ban Corrupted Boon, you can do that too. But like as long as this is flipping +5s to -5s, you probably can't play with this spell. It's a little too good. But here, what were we talking about? Attunement. So world map casting, they're like really broadly, people try to categorize the game as having only one phase, but in truth, there are multiple phases to the game in Age of Wonders 4, during which different stats are actually going to get tested. This is why during Vivisection, I tell people to mostly ignore all of the nonsense widgets, because you're probably not going to be able to decode them. But like ultimately, in Age of Wonders 4, there really are phases, and in the turns from like 15 to 40 roughly, the most important stat in the game usually is world map casting, because world map casting allows you to do stuff not only like casting a strategic layer damage spell, which is going to harm all of the enemy units in that stack, therefore allow you to take the fight easier, maintain the amount of experience points, but also take less damage, therefore take another fight, but also just like let you pump out all of your unit enchantments super duper quickly. And so like world map casting, it's not always the most important, right? Like the first 5-10 turns, not huge, because you may or may not have enough mana to do all this stuff, and you might not have enough research to have like an infinity number of things to do. But like as you scale your knowledge into outer space and play the game, you're just gonna have a berserk number of things that you can cast, and world map casting is the way to get there. So like Attunement really has unnecessarily ridiculous scaling on that form, but then also in late game PvP fights, like the only thing that matters, which we will talk about whenever we get to potential, is sort of like whoever casts the most spells. In a battle between players of remotely similar power levels, the person who casts the most spells that do something generally wins the game, like I would say 90% of the time. So there have been periods of time where it really has just been whoever clicks attack on a mage lock hero the most wins, but like that is patch specific. Most of the time in Age of Wonders 4 is just a fundamental value of the game. Whoever casts the most spells that do something in combat wins. If you kill your opponent's ruler, they can't cast spells. So people are like immediately drawn to, I'm just gonna kill the enemy ruler and then that'll be that. And that is a good play pattern, but it also means that if you can get extra combat casting points, that you can cast more spells, because like again, in a relatively close battle between people of equal power levels, it is not going to be over in one turn if you build a good toolbox and actually understand how to do a PvP fight. It's going to be 5, 6, 7, and so that'll involve you like just casting a bunch of really expensive spells and trying to get value out of them. The combat casting could literally be infinity to 1 and have it still be good value, and right now it's 1 to 1, and that really does break parity in the game, because like it doesn't allow Mystic Attunement to necessarily cast more spells than the opponent, but it allows them to cast higher value spells than the opponent, and once you start getting into the high tier research, then like you really can just bury people in value with casting in a way that's really dumb and not fun. And speaking of being dumb and not fun, I guess we can talk about potential really quickly and why they are still the best of the mystics if you really know what you're doing, but they are so complicated that I do think that if I put them on a tier list, I would probably treat them the same way that I did barbarians back a billion years ago. I would probably put these guys at B+, and not because of their power scaling, but because they really are just like insanely complicated and you have to know what you're doing. Don't bring like 10,000 Spellweavers. I don't know why people hear this thing is good and then immediately say I gotta build 14 of them. There are things that are incredibly powerful as 1x's in a real PvP fight in Age of Wonders 4 because they offer you value and utility. But one of the things that you kind of can never run out of value and utility is overchannels, because that allows you to just cast more total spells. And if you cast more total spells than the opponent, you're going to get more total value out of the opponent than the other people. And potential has just like an infinite number of ways to get them. And all of the other little dingly bops, really, in my experience on potential, are basically widgets that you should ignore. I think the only other like important thing about potential is they have a research post SPI, but they have the best stat in the game, which is more casting slots, and the best SPI in the game, which is research post. So like if you want to make potentials work, then you really do need to work on your early game auto resolves. If you don't know where to start with that, then like the potential build that I did, Unbounded Potential, really is like designed with Dota terms in line, and like you can kind of use that as a template. But just fix your early game auto resolves, and potential is just like unbelievably better than everybody else, except for the weird attunement problem. I don't know what's going on there with their astral echoes, but whatever, guys. It's hopefully we get that one fixed. But yeah, that's the Mystics thing. And then I guess because we're out here talking about like weird cerebral stuff, why don't we talk just like very briefly about a unit that I know that people do not understand, and it kind of like piggybacks off what we're talking here about with our potentials, which are Transmuters. Transmuters are a counterspell. If you don't understand counterspell in in Magic the Gathering, it's a way to prevent your opponent from utilizing their own resources. It's one of the best forms of disruption, but you need to know how to use a counterspell. If you just like throw counterspells at random 2-drops and limited in Magic the Gathering, you're gonna die horrendously because you're just not using it well. You need to line it up very carefully. This is one of those things that, like, in the same vein as where is it? The Iron Golems, you do not want to max these. This is a bodyguard for your hero. You stand it next to people and you use the defense mode on it. The defense mode on Iron Golem I can't show off to you here because the encyclopedia in Age of Wonders 4 is very dumb, but like, open Iron Golem, look at their defense mode. It gives people resistance to everything. It's ludicrously better than all of the other defense modes in the game. So like, if you want to use this, you just stand it next to your hero and like block, and then your hero can massacre. And then similarly with a Transmuter, what you do is you use Petrify that forces your opponent to cast Anti-Magic Tincture. But if you're out there like, you know, disrupting your opponent by actually like stunning them, and then they are forced to use an Anti-Magic Tincture in a PvP fight, you know what you did? You burned their spell slot. And because you know, unless you're playing with overchannel effects, you only get one spell slot per turn. That is really powerful if you know how to use it, but it is one of those like pseudo galaxy brain things where if you hear something says like this is good, and then you just want to like jam it without listening to the other words, then like you're not going to get value out of it at all, and you're going to like look at the damage and be like, I don't understand this. Just use it in a PvP fight. Bring one of them, see what it does to the pacing. If you're worried about status resistance, then like, I don't know, watch my videos. Honest to God, guys, they're not that complicated. Like, you can do status resistance things and make it so that you're just guaranteed to stun, and then your opponent is guaranteed to be forced to burn a spell slot. But like, if you bring 14 Transmuters, you're gonna die horribly, because that's not what they do. They counter spells. They don't interact with like the units on the board. And then I guess, you know what, we can use that as a way to also talk about other things that I think are just like generically traps for new players, and like bring to this video at least a little bit of what we're talking about in Vivisection. So let's talk about probably one of my favorite spells in the game, if definitely like probably the worst utilized, which is Fanatical Workforce. So in Let's Vivisect Age of Wonders 4, I talk a lot about like the things that you can ignore in Age of Wonders 4, because there really are a lot of them, and I'm not doing that to tell you to not pay attention. I'm telling you to tell you to pay attention. And as you pay attention to the game and you get a feel for how much production you get out of killing things, you realize that production isn't that important. It is good, but it's not like it's the best stat in the game. Draft is the best stat in the game, and then probably Imperium and Knowledge. I don't know. Those are really the only stats that matter from like turn 1 to 15, and then like world map casting is the only thing that matters 15 to 40. Oh, and then like another meta aside, I guess, is that like if you're actually good at the game, then at the end game you switch all of your research posts over to conduits and all of your quarries over to mines. I promise, because like the way that you play meta is that timing attack that we described, and so like really high skill players will have a very good feel for what their economy is going to feel like on turn 40 and turn 50. ability and like when they can just go all in on mana. Because if you have 10,000 research things that you've picked up along the way and you can't cast all of them because you have no mana, then like you and your friends are going to have to wait 15 turns clicking end turn over and over and over and over and over again as you accumulate mana and pretend like you're playing a real game of Age of Wonders 4. But like, that is not how meta people play. If you do that, they will devour you while you are waiting for your mana to show up. And so what you really do need to do is get a feel for, do I have all the tools that I need for my build to function? And if so, then just like go 100% into raw resources and corn the players. That's when you really do want to rush, is that when you feel like you got all the resources you need to kill everybody. Not one player, but everybody. Fanatical Workforce, this is good. It is a spell that I am myself like definitely addicted to casting in ways that are unhealthy and not representative of what you're supposed to be doing with a spell, because it hurts you if you cast the spell too many times. But really what this is for rushing through your wizard tower stuff. This is another one of the problems kind of with Mistlings and Summoner generally, is that like I do still think that almost all Mystic builds probably do want Fanatical Workforce, because they are pretty production anemic and pretty draft anemic, and you need your pacing to be good at the beginning of the game, and most of the time you get your pacing from killing things. So if you're playing something weaker, then you can use Fanatical Workforce to help your auto-resolves give you more economy by just letting your auto-resolves be worse and getting the value this way. But like, if you've watched Vivisection and understand that most of the infrastructure in the game really is nonsense on a basic level, then on a more deeper level, you'll also understand that by building the nonsense, you're costing yourself gold, and by costing yourself gold, you're not allowing yourself to buy rush units, and by allowing yourself to not buy rush units, you're making it so you're not going to have enough units to activate more fights, to capture more EXP, to scale your army faster, to conquer ancient wonders faster. So like, you really should not be wasting gold building stuff that you do not need, and this thing is a gold addict. So if you're trying to play around with Fanatical Workforce, be extremely careful. This is good for wizard tower rushing and for catching you up if your build is bad, but if you're putting this on barbarians, then you have no idea what you're doing, because this thing is going to burn off all your gold building like granaries and things that are actively harmful for you, and then your economy is going to be worse than if you just like picked random things that did damage and vibed. So great spell, but you really need to understand context of things whenever it comes to Age of Wonders 4 and like the way that the game really truly plays out, and the things that you can just let shuffle to the background. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about like where things actually have moved around, because I imagine that's probably what people care about, but it really doesn't matter that much, because the way that they've moved around is really all like in tandem. Sometimes things move around like a bunch of things move, but they all move at random. In this case, they've all moved in the same way. So nonsense tomes got a lot worse because now the ruler affinity no longer generates empire affinity, which means you can no longer use your rulers to just like bounce around in terms of your tomes and unlock silly things. And so that means that like more narrow things like Tome of Faith are just like worse. So this is like a D tier now. Reason for Tome of Faith is also kind of just like heartbreaking to me, because this easily could be like a C+ if this was the fixed starting spell, but this is another one of those things that like if you are a mid-skill player trying to level up to a high-skill player, you really need to be paying attention to like what spells you're getting off of your spell book, because some of them have fixed spells at the beginning of the game and some of them don't. And Tome of Faith is one of these things where like you're gonna roll into Wrath of the Faithful as your starting spell like a lot of the time, and it's really awful for your auto resolves if that happens. If this were just army heal like the fixed thing, then like you could play Tome of Faith pretty easily as your first tome and then do some other things, but that's not the way it works right now. And because everything really is a snowballing pacing game in Age of Wonders 4, if you miss on army heal for your first roll on a Tome of Faith, then your build just will not function. I promise, it's awful. I've tried it before, I've tried it on stream. It is really bad for you. But if Triumph somehow ends up watching this video in the future, if they could just make it so that army heal is the fixed one instead of like floating back and forth between these to trick new players, I think everybody would benefit. I think sweaty people would be able to play with Tome of Faith in cool and interesting and creative ways, and new players would not get like absolutely hosed by researching something that does nothing at the beginning of the game. But like basically because there is that affinity trap of like you have to have 8 in order to get up to here, and you also have to have enough affinity to make sure that your Empire tree unlocks in a reasonable pace. That, like, if you're picking Tome of Faith and Tome of Zeal and Tome of Inquisition and Tome of the Beacon and blah 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 blah, blah to just like max out your order affinity, you are costing yourself opportunity cost, both in terms of like the obvious things of the affinity, but the Empire tree really is just like colossally different in terms of value. If you do not understand that, like, go watch the Empire and Development tree from like really honestly a year and a half ago or whatever, because aside from a couple of things like Rangers, where like I just didn't know that the max movement cap was 2 for the movement points, most of that is still the same and most of that is still accurate. Some of the little widget numbers have moved around, but like those really should not be the things that you're focused on from patch to patch. Widgets in all 4Xs are unimportant. Fundamentals are what is important. And at a fundamental level, you should not be exclusively doing one affinity. You should be trying to do the things that allow you to build a toolbox in Age of Wonders 4 to make good progress through the core. And the core is like massacring your autos, scaling your knowledge into outer space, and making sure you have a good toolbox for a PvP/auto-resolve fight at the end of the game. And like, just don't waste affinity points on tomes that you really cannot get good value out of, and you just can't get good value out of this tome. So like any of the tomes that I was like kind of on the fence on in some of the other tier list videos, just give them like a -1 on their letter grade, and you'll probably get the game a little bit better. I really do think that that's sort of like where this video needs to end. This video is not meant to like call anybody out. Rather, this video is like meant to like I Master Roshi am looking for somebody to teach this game to, so that I can like do things that are artistically meaningful to me. So if this is the sort of content that you like, then I guess hit me up on Discord. I'm glad to teach you how to play this game, and as soon as you understand the meta and the patterns that you need to be looking for, and how like bad I am at unit micro on the strategic layer, you will quickly surpass me, I promise. So if that's your interest, then like hit me up, I suppose. But people really need to understand that the old tier list videos required a ludicrous amount of work, because I wanted them to be as accurate as humanly possible, and they are as accurate as humanly possible, and they really will not mislead you. And that's kind of like why I don't feel like redoing them. They do need now to be redone, because they need to integrate the new content, and so I am not like I'm not unsympathetic to that goal, but like the fundamentals of the game is what those tier lists were built around, and the fundamentals of the game remain the same, and the fundamentals of the game probably will always remain the same. So this is again not me saying I'm not gonna make those tier lists, but this is me saying that I honest to God consider those videos borderline evergreen content, because they still are not hurting people, and that is why I made them. I make all of these videos to make sure that people are playing this game and enjoying it, and if you do not understand what is happening in this game and how much stuff you can ignore, this game will hurt you. All right, well, that's Walker, and I guess I will see you guys at some point in the near future.